Welcome to the Eat for Endurance podcast, where we explore the connection between nutrition, performance, and health for busy, active people. My name is Claire Shorenstein, and I'm a board-certified sports dietitian and endurance athlete with over 10 years of experience working with teenage and adult athletes of all abilities. I started this podcast to provide evidence-based guidance, inspiring athlete stories, and practical tips on a wide variety of nutrition topics so that you can feel better, crush your endurance goals, and thrive as a human being. I am so excited to welcome back sports dietitian Stevie Smith again to the show for a second part of a two-part series on how various factors affect how you should feel yourself during exercise and especially during endurance activities. In case you missed it, we recently covered how speed and intensity affect feeling during exercise. And today we're exploring the question, how does body size or body mass impact fueling needs during exercise? We intentionally separated these topics and put them into two different episodes because we are not sending the message that being in a larger body, however you define that, equates to being slower. There's a lot to unpack as we answer this question, including addressing some recent research that suggests we may actually benefit from additional carbohydrate as body size increases. And I think you're just going to get a lot out of this episode regardless of what your current weight is. So give it a listen. I hope you're enjoying these shorter episodes covering these very specific topics. If you are, I'd love to hear from you. Let me know. And speaking of which, if you are enjoying this show, I would be so incredibly grateful if you could take a quick minute to give the podcast a 5-star rating and review and share it with a friend. Also, don't forget to hit follow or subscribe on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen so you don't miss future episodes. Thank you so much for your support. All right, here's my chat with Stevie Smith, all about how body size and mass change your carbohydrate and other fueling goals. Stevie, welcome back to the podcast. We are doing part 2 on how various factors influence our performance fueling. Hello. How's it going?
Wow. It's going great. Thanks so much for having me back. Excited to be here again.
Yeah. All right. So we recently addressed speed and intensity and how that affects our fueling. And that was a really great conversation. If you guys have not heard that one, go back and listen. It's short, it's sweet. It answers tons of questions that we both individually get all the time as sports dietitians. And today we're going to be talking about how body size influences performance fueling. And I want to be clear that being in a larger body does not necessarily equate to being slower. That is exactly why we intentionally separated these topics out and put them into 2 different shorter episodes versus talking about both of them together because we really didn't want you guys to mash those things together. All right. Before we jump in, just in case anyone's new to the show and they haven't heard your past episode, can you quickly introduce yourself?
Hello. Yes, I'm Stevie Lyn Smith. I'm a registered dietitian, board certified in sports nutrition. I've been at this for 13 years now, have my own virtual private practice, Stevie Lyn Nutrition. That'll be 5. And I, much like Claire, work with endurance athletes and active individuals to help learn how to fuel their bodies, not just for performance, but overall health, well-being, to enjoy sport. And if you're into it, chase after some of those big goals.
Love it. All right, so let's get right into it. So for a really long time, and this is even in my course, I need to start revising this, but carb goals per hour during exercise were based on intensity, again, which we just covered, and duration, not on body size. And, as you know, as hopefully everyone knows, but I want to emphasize that athletes come in all shapes and sizes, all different heights and weights and body compositions. So when we're talking body size, when we say those words, we're referring to all of that. It's not just that you have more fat mass or less fat mass or anything like that. We are literally talking about all the things that contribute to your total body mass. So maybe you can just explain a little bit about the historical guidelines, typically what we're, talking about when it comes to carb fueling goals and it not being reliant on body size, which was always a little bit of a funny thing because pretty much everything else is related to body size. But maybe you can just give some context here before we talk about it. That'd be great.
Yeah, I know. I always thought, I remember when I was first learning sports nutrition, I was like, wait a minute. Why is this just a set grams and everything else is per kilogram of body weight? But yeah, so when we're thinking about carbohydrate needs during exercise, it is basically time-based and a set range of grams. If we're looking over 60 minutes, we want to be fueling our workouts. Typically you'll hear minimum 30 grams around that hour. And then when you get over an hour and a half, and longer, you have heard more of like 60 to 90 grams. As I discussed in the previous episode, I tend to be a little bit more generous. Like I don't really let anyone get away with just like 30 grams per hour. I think that's just a missed opportunity for athletes. But like technically speaking, when we're under kind of that 90 minutes, that 30 grams per hour is the goal. And of course, we talked about in the last episode the trend of up towards 100 grams of carb per hour. So all of that has been based basically on time, irregardless of body shape, size, height, body composition, etc. And those are the guidelines. And it's not necessarily meaning that those guidelines are wrong. There has been new research that has come out that might say, hey, maybe we need to look at this a little bit differently. And see how maybe our larger athletes and larger bodies might need a little bit more carbohydrate than we once thought. So again, this is all going to be very unique. And I think something I want to make sure I say, and you've kind of alluded to it, is that I always really like to stress, and I know you're in the same boat, that like underfueling, low energy availability, relative energy deficiency in sport, eating disorders, disordered eating can impact anyone in any body size. And while this is like performance fueling, I just, I know you probably want to drive that point home and make it like very clear that like it does not matter what you look like, you can be impacted by all of those things. Because I have a lot of people in larger bodies that when they hear me say that or they see a post, they're like, I really never thought it could be me, but like now that you're pointing out like these are the signs of it, I think it is me.
Mm-hmm. Yep, underfueling can happen to anybody. Absolutely. For sure.
And of course, like underfueling is very multifactorial. There's a lot going into it. But again, I always see performance fueling, like in workout fueling, again, as an opportunity, one of those silos that we can kind of find what works for us to be a player in hopefully preventing low energy availability, underfueling, and all of the negative outcomes that come with it. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah. And in terms of like the scientific reasoning behind the guidelines, that 30 to 90 gram per hour being more like duration and, not body size related, am I correct in that it was related to like how much glucose and fructose, everything we could absorb per hour? Like, am I thinking of that? Yeah, that's what I thought. I was like, I just want to make sure. Because if I remember correctly, it was like, oh, well, we can only absorb 60 grams of glucose per hour. But when you add other carb sources or simple sugars like fructose, that's how we get to absorb more. So that kind of, okay.
100%. Yeah, sorry, I didn't.
I was like, I'm pretty sure. No. I'm like, I'm pretty sure because I instead of heavily researching for today's episode, I just went running on the beach and sea glass hunting for like 2 hours.
Love that. Yeah,
not very much running, lots of sea glass hunting. So I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's correct, but I'm gonna run that by you.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, so that is one of the reasons that we've seen that big shift. Is just I think about it like an expressway. Right? Like if you only have one expressway into a city, so like one carbohydrate source, there's going to be a point where you hit a traffic jam, right? Like no more is getting through. But when you have 3 expressways into a city or 3 multiple transportable carbohydrates, right? We can get more carbs into the city without a traffic jam. The traffic jam being GI distress. Yep. So that is where like that, has since shit. I don't even know when that shifted. I feel like it's been a long time because it's been a long time. Different.
Yeah. Same. No. The reason I'm bringing it up is because like when I used to talk about this a while ago in terms of like, oh, and by the way, our carb goals are irrespective of body size, and I would always talk about absorption, and it's in part like how much we can take is related to how much we can absorb. And of course now we're pushing the boundaries or the upper limit of like how much carb we can actually take in and tolerate and use and everything, and especially in the elite population. But yeah, so that was why I brought it up, just kind of in that context.
Yep, for sure. No, that's a great point to pick up. And I feel like it's kind of like any of those things where you're talking about something and you don't even think to say it.
Yeah.
You're just like, it's just like the knowledge that just exists in your brain.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for asking that.
No. Yeah. No. Okay. So larger athletes, and Last time we were focusing more on the recreational athlete, the mid-back, the packer. We're not necessarily doing that today, because just because you're a larger athlete does not necessarily mean you are a slower athlete. There are plenty of elite athletes and who are very tall and who have muscle mass and who are larger bodied athletes, depending on the sport, right? So this is where it's also very sport specific. We've seen things come out in Tour de France cyclists where a cyclist has increased body size and actually performed better because they have more power and strength, right? So we're just I just want to, again, maybe this is obvious to some, but it may not be, that we're not necessarily talking about slower runners, but there may also be slower athletes I keep saying runners, but I mean all athletes. We may see athletes who are in larger bodies who also happen to be slower. So this really is encompassing both ends of the spectrum when it comes to high performance or not. But either way, when you are a larger athlete, we're often thinking about how, okay, well, being a larger athlete, you're burning more energy during exercise. You also have bigger glycogen stores, and there are other things to keep in mind. And maybe you can kind of call attention to, what do we need to consider when it comes to specifically to performance fueling with larger bodied athletes.
Yeah. So,
and also, how do we even define that? I forgot to even, that's probably that's where that's going to be a tricky one. Sorry, I hate to throw that in at the last minute. I realized I kept saying larger bodied athletes. I'm like, what do I even mean by that? There's no definition.
Honestly,
there's no definition.
There's really no definition. And I think that's something that isn't going to have a hard definition anytime
I agree.
soon.
It's a spectrum. I would say it's like a continuum or a spectrum, right?
Yeah. So sorry
to throw that one at you.
No, it's okay. I don't think there will be a definition. Yeah. And I know you want to talk about the study that came out.
Oh, yeah.
That was done in 2024 that looked specifically at this. And I posted a research deep dive of this on my Instagram. And I just feel like I got such pushback about how they defined what is a large athlete and what is not a large athlete.
Well, because it's kind of stupid. I don't know.
It is stupid, but I was like, I didn't write the study. I don't know. I'm not saying I agree. I'm doing the research breakdown and, dismantling the science for you. I don't agree with it. This study defined a large, I'm going to say air quotes, athlete.
Air quotes.
As over 70 kilograms body weight.
154 pounds, folks.
Yep.
That is not large. Not large at all.
That is not large.
That's laughable.
And I don't remember exactly the group that did this research, but again, this is just, bigger picture kind of society, right? These researchers may well be in that older school of thought of I'm thinking weight class, aesthetic sports, right? The study was done in cyclists. So are they thinking of we think about Tour de France cyclists, right? Some of those very lean, elite.
Very lean.
And that could have been the researchers' context. I'm not saying their context is right or appropriate. The study was interesting, very small. It was only 15 cyclists. Again, so this is why when we look at these research breakdowns, people were freaking out. I was like, listen, this is new and emerging research. We're just breaking it down. Obviously, much more research needs to be done. We need to look at a different sample, a larger sample. Can we get a sample that's more representative of the athletes you and I serve before we really take this information and directly apply it to them? More of this is just that curiosity, right? Of, okay, it's important that we stay on top of the new research and kind of just stay curious. So then, when you and I, or if anyone's listening to this, can say, hey, maybe, I notice I'm not feeling great after my workouts and I'm hitting 80 grams of carb per hour and I really want to hit my performance goals. Maybe I can be curious and try a little bit more because this study may apply to me and I can play around with it and see how it feels, right? So using it as just kind of a little nugget of knowledge, knowing that this is not the end all be all, but it's something that we can use and say, hey, let's stay curious about this and see, does this apply to me as an athlete? Yes or no? And play around with it. So like I said, the study was very small. And basically, again, 2 groups based on the body size small, under 70 kilograms, large, over 70 kilograms. They did a 2-hour cycling session at 95% of lactate threshold while consuming 90 grams of carb per hour. So like kind of that top end. The key finding, the larger athletes oxidized or broke down and used significantly more exogenous glucose, so the carbs that they consumed, when compared to their smaller peers. So why this matters, right? This is showing a positive correlation with the ability to oxidize ingested carbohydrates with body size. So larger athletes may have a higher capacity for using carbs and may need higher intake to optimize performance. So again, very individual, very small study. The researchers found that 0.7 grams per kg per hour was a better approximation of the athlete's needs versus like just that 60 to 90 range. That was one of the key takeaways of the study. So I think it's super interesting because like you even look at Gatorade Sports Science Institute and their stuff is like, oh yeah, it's like irrespective of body size. And like, again, we're not going to change, like they're not doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
We're not going to change everything off of one very small study that looked at a very small sample population. But again, it's about staying curious here.
Yeah. And we have these, I mean, when we look at the ranges, 30 to 90 plus grams, I mean, it's a huge range. So we can even take something like this and be like, okay, cool. Maybe if I weigh 250 pounds, like maybe I need to be more towards the higher end. Again, assuming you can tolerate it and you've gone through gut training and all that stuff, but maybe you're just, experimenting. Oh, well, how do I feel if I increase? Like, do I feel better versus, oh, well, I guess I should just do 30 grams. Like, I don't need any more or whatever. So as you said, yeah, staying curious, experimenting, kind of messing around with all that. And, the wording that I prefer versus like, larger versus smaller. Like I prefer to think about it again as more of this continuum of just asking the question, which is a question we're trying to answer today, of like, how does body size influence our fueling? Mm-hmm. Because that's really kind of showing like it is just that slider, of like, okay, you're a little bit, you have a heavier body mass. Like how does, what should we explore versus smaller? The other thing I think that we need to address is if you do have I guess I have to use this too. It's like, it's hard not to use large and small. It really is so hard. Okay. I'm just going to keep doing air quotes here. If you are a smaller bodied athlete, if you have less body mass, okay, we can use less and more. If you have less body mass, that does not necessarily mean you do not need to fuel. So we really want to send the messaging that like, yes, this study, for instance, is indicating we may need more with more body mass. That does not equal you need less with less body mass. So you still need to fuel. It depends on what you're doing, as we went into with intensity, speed, all that stuff. Like how hard are you pushing yourself? Like what's the duration? Like what's going on? So thinking about it in those terms. And the last thing I'll say is we also want to keep in mind, are you a newer athlete or maybe you haven't been training very much and you're getting back into things versus you are a very seasoned athlete, experienced athlete, a very well-trained athlete, because that in itself also changes how we use fuel. What would you like to comment or expand upon?
Yeah,
that was a lot.
I know. I was like, where do I
Sorry.
start?
I rambled.
We love rambles, honestly. No, I think you brought up with a great point that like this, if you are smaller than the 70 kgs, like this, I see a lot of people taking those mental gymnastics there, right?
Yes.
Like when I see like other people on the internet, like taking research and like making a lot of gymnastics to get to their claim, I see a lot of people making that leap. But yes, this does not automatically mean that you need less. If you have more body mass, it doesn't automatically mean that you need more. Again, it's, starting to pay attention to how are you feeling in workouts, after workouts? How is your recovery? How is your energy? Do you have more body mass and you find yourself getting hurt every season? Is this a needle you can thread to maybe address that and, use it from an injury prevention standpoint? I think, and I know you probably do the same, but a lot of the time with my one-on-one clients, it's like, how can I teach you to listen to your body's feedback across all spectrums and start to learn how to, when you're off on your own after we're not working together, kind of push and pull and play around with things like in-workout fueling to get the outcomes that you want, or stop like an injury cycle as an example here.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really, really important point, that this doesn't mean that we need less. And we need to keep playing around and finding what's going to work best for us as an individual athlete. But again, just more of how can we use this to stay curious? And if you are someone who feels like you're checking a lot of those other boxes when it comes to nutrition, recovery, how you're approaching your training, and you're like, I'm not quite seeing the performance gains I want to see, maybe this is something I need to play around with to see if I can move that needle where I want it to go.
Yeah. And then if you are like a newer athlete, you're not as well trained, your need for carbohydrates is even higher at that point, you know? So like your ability to have more fat oxidation is just not quite there. So,
I forgot about that.
No, I tacked that on the end. That was my fault. I meant to address that separately and I was just like on a roll with it. But yeah, so, you know, that's something we just want to keep in mind as well. You know, whatever your body size is, that's another factor. There are lots and lots of factors that influence fueling. We're just addressing, you know, a couple of them. But yeah, so that's something just another, you know, to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. You're definitely going to see those differences in, you know, highly trained athletes, which is why, you know, like when I do my research deep dives, if they do mention like this isn't a highly trained endurance athlete, you know, again, I try to point that out. And that doesn't mean that like this automatically doesn't apply to a non-highly trained or a non-elite athlete. It's just kind of, okay, I'm going to take this nugget of information and put it in my pocket in how I might apply this. You know, that's the other thing with a lot of research that we see is that people, not only do they do a lot of gymnastics, but sometimes they really try to extrapolate it and apply it to a population that it's not appropriate to.
Yeah.
I did a post today on beetroot juice supplementation in female athletes. And
I saw that.
Yeah, it was an interesting study. And it's like, no, I'm not going to just tell every female athlete to go and take beetroot juice, but like.
It's also 500 milliliters. Like, that's a lot of beetroot juice.
That is a
like,
lot of
gross.
100%.
No thanks. And daily. It's like, I don't want that.
Right? I just think about some people and I'm like, I don't know if my tummy would like that either.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
like, you know, like this is new research, you know, they looked at it in a different population. So like, can we take this and like maybe see if we got the foundation right? It's just taking all of these things and like I said, staying curious. And again, if you kind of fall into this category of having, you know, more body mass, aiming for high performance, maybe in a plateau, maybe kind of hitting some roadblocks. And, you know, again, staying curious, this is something you can play around with. And hopefully there's more research on it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. and you know, and what we're suggesting too is like not necessarily increasing in a like super prescriptive way. Like, you know, like just as we said, like there's a wide range that we recommend with carbs, and you can just kind of push it up a little bit and see how that feels. So it's not like we're saying it has to be a particular number of grams per kilogram of body weight or anything like that. Like you can just kind of be a little more fluid with how you approach that. I wanted to take a quick break to shout out my virtual private practice, Eat for Endurance. You may think that working with a sports dietitian like myself or like Stevie may not be within your budget, and I wanted to make sure you're aware that I have many free and extremely low-cost resources and services available. I currently have 7 free nutrition downloads that you can grab on my website, eatforendurance.com, and if you want direct access to me but have a limited budget, then you'll love my nutrition membership, Fuel for Life Crew. For just $30 a month, you get to ask me all your nutrition questions, get the support of a small but growing community of busy, active people just like you, and you also get full access to my online nutrition resources and live monthly calls on different topics that you actually help choose. Pretty cool. Also, there's no commitment. Try it for a month, cancel anytime, not a big deal. Visit my website, eatforendurance.com, to sign up or to explore my one-to-one nutrition coaching services. All right, let's get back to the episode. What about other nutrients? So if we're thinking about longer course triathletes, ultra runners, people who are out, you know, out there, cyclists, you know, people who are out and about for many, many, many hours, we're doing more than just carbohydrate usually in those situations. So what are things that we want to keep in mind? I know this study was on carbs, but when we're thinking about total calorie intake, protein, fat, maybe, just all the other things, because we know that larger bodied athletes do burn more during exercise. It takes more work, obviously, to move your body. And yeah, so what are some kind of tidbits that we might want to keep in mind there?
Yeah. So like when we're thinking about the ultra endurance athlete, Ironman athlete, when we're out there for a longer amount of time, a little bit of fat and protein is going to be beneficial. When we're thinking about protein in particular, this is the one that I tend to be like a little bit more slightly calculated with, especially in the longer races, looking around like, what is it, like 2 grams of protein per. What is it? Is it based on growth? No.
Wait, are you talking about daily or are you talking about performance?
I'm talking about in performance.
Oh God, what is the calculation? Is it point? Isn't it point something? Oh, I don't know. Oh God, I should know this by now. I'm usually going like more like 5 to 10 grams per hour or something, but there is a kilogram body weight one that's from research. I know. I don't remember the exact number. It's yeah. But
over that, like once you hit over that 2-hour mark, if you're going to be out there for like an ultra distance, like you said, I tend to end around maybe like that 10 grams of protein, like per hour, give or take, when we're looking at protein in particular for those long races. When it comes to fat, I keep this definitely more athlete specific because, again, ultra marathons, it depends how you race it, right? Going back to the intensity episode, like, you can tolerate there for a really long time, but it could be a high intensity for you, and trying to figure out like what you tolerate.
And how long? Like, is it a 50K, a 50 miler, a 100 miler, a 200 miler? Like, those are really different things, the different sports,
And this is why I'm thinking like, oh my God, it's so individualized.
Yeah.
And then, obviously like Ironman races are very long, but like you're working at a high intensity.
Yeah.
So like, I always think about that. And of course, people are very different. I've seen people eat slices of pizza on their bike and be just fine. Where me, I'm like, I have to make sure all of my solids have under 10 grams of fat.
Yeah.
I'm a delicate flour, right?
Yeah.
And I know I'm not going to tolerate more than 10 grams of fat per hour. But I've seen recommendations and people like on lower intensities doing like 20, 30 grams of fat per hour with like 20, 30 grams of carb. That's not something I technically tend to recommend. Like a long run, like eating nuts and nut butter on a long run, not for me. But like if you are...
Or cheese.
If you're an ultra athlete and you're at a low enough intensity that you're tolerating those, that's definitely can be a tool in the toolbox when we're thinking about that.
Yeah. And so linking it back to body size, when we're thinking, no, it's all good. It's good to lay all this stuff out. But we think about, what's like the general, very generic advice, and people are like, have 250 to 300 calories an hour or whatever they're saying, right? And again, that's not really a body size dependent rec. It's kind of just throwing it out there, much like we throw out the 30 to 90 grams or 60 to 90 grams of carb. And so I guess how should we adjust that type of thinking depending on how much you weigh or how big you are?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to like you said, like the protein recommendations.
By the way, sorry to interrupt, but I remember looking up in the research, like the actual one of the recommended gram per kilogram thing. And I remember calculating it for an athlete who was in a larger body, and it was like some obscene number. And I'm like, this is not going to happen, like practically speaking, like this is just not going to happen. So it was more about like, what can we get in versus hitting a number. You know what I mean?
Exactly. I don't know. That tends to be because what I'm thinking with the 10 grams, because I don't know if we're out there for ultra, if we can get 10 grams of protein, just like as the example, I tend to see a lot of benefit from it.
Yeah.
Because I know that's an ISIN recommendation.
Yeah. I think it was from that paper that the protein is. Yeah. Sorry, guys. We're just brain farting on the number. I want to say it's the ISSN paper that had that. I want to say it's like point something, 0.5.
There's so many numbers they want us to.
There's too many numbers, guys. We had other things to do than look up numbers. We can't memorize everything. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Keep going. I interrupted you.
No, but that's based off gram per hour, right? So
yeah.
And that's again where it's something that staying curious, playing around with it and being like, okay, like maybe I have been getting 5 grams per hour. Once I get over, I typically start to implement that over the 2-hour mark. I don't know if other dietitians do it differently, but maybe you've been getting 5 and you're like, you know what, I want to try to move the needle a little bit more. Maybe I aim for that 10 grams per hour. Again, it goes back to sometimes less isn't more, maybe playing around, staying curious and trying a little bit more and seeing how that feedback is in recovery. Do you tolerate it? How is your performance? How are you feeling coming out of, some of those big, long training weekends and going from there?
Yeah. So I think the takeaway here is, okay, we have this, research study that's suggesting, hey, why don't you play around with carbohydrate? If you are at a higher body mass, maybe you would benefit from pushing it up, being more on the higher end of the range. And then when we're thinking about these other nutrients as well, whether it's calories per hour, all these things, and you hear generic advice about whatever, like maybe 250 calories an hour is good for someone who is in a smaller body, and it might not be enough for a larger body. And then, of course, we think about all of the other factors we've already discussed, like intensity and all that stuff. Yep. So lots of things to juggle, lots of things to consider. At the end of the day, you know your body best. You're the expert of your body, and kind of experimenting with stuff is really cool. We're coming up on time, but I do want to just point out, and I think we did mention this earlier, just there are so many other body weight based things that we talk about with performance fueling, whether it's like how many milligrams of caffeine should you do and how much water should you take in. Of course, that's more dependent on sweat rate and stuff like that. But, we know that hydration needs change based on body weight. There are lots of other things that are body weight based. So maybe we can just call out quickly some things that do change with body size that we also want to pay attention to when it comes to performance fueling.
Oh man, like in the day-to-day? Or
well, is there anything else in performance, like in intra-workout stuff we want to call out first? Yeah, day-to-day, that's definitely pretty much everything.
Right? I was like, that's everything.
No, that's a whole other topic. I won't subject you to that. Like in our last minute, let's tackle everyday food. No.
I was like, wait, that's literally everything except for carbs.
Yeah.
No.
Caffeine
is probably the biggest one to make sure that we are doing the caffeine appropriately. When I'm thinking about this and whenever we're implementing caffeine, I'm thinking back to the post where I used the 100 milligram of caffeine gel and I thought I was going to die. First of all, this one is done by kilogram of body mass, and it's very, very personal, and it's very much depends on like how do you metabolize caffeine. And
was it 3 to 5? Is that the milligrams per? 3 to 6. Sorry, I knew it was close. 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram. And then over what time frame? It's like over is it per day? I always forget. No. But what is the time frame?
I don't know if there's a time frame.
I don't think there's a time frame, and I'm always like, wait, how much?
Yep.
Because because you have people that are like, oh, don't go over anything over 400 milligrams in a day is not good for you, like that kind of thing.
Yeah. No, I actually just pulled up the paper here really quick.
Oh, good. Yes. Thank you.
Put it in front of me. But it says caffeine consistently been shown to improve exercise performance when consumed in doses of 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram body mass.
Yeah.
Minimal effective doses currently remain unclear, but they could be as low as 2 milligrams per kg. And very high doses, so 9, are associated with a high incidence of side effects and do not seem to be required to get the benefits of caffeine, which would make sense if I did the math on the 100 milligrams of caffeine I took. I mean, probably a little bit much. I'm a very small person, so...
I've taken like the precision 100 milligrams, and I mean, it tastes horrible. Any caffeine thing always has that like terrible aftertaste, but I actually felt okay. It's been a while. I think I felt okay. I have a huge pile of those gels sitting in my cabinet.
Oh my God.
But yeah, it definitely was a jolt.
I was on the treadmill and I was like, am I going to get disoriented and fall off this treadmill right now? Like, I was like, I feel a little unwell.
Oh gosh. Yeah. Well, everyone responds to caffeine differently. This is why we have to try those things.
And, I'm a regular caffeine drinker, so I wasn't expecting that much of a response. So I was like, oh, I'm very surprised. But yes, so like those are the dosing. I mean, again, so that is very body size, weight dependent is where you're going to figure that out. But yeah, otherwise, like in workout, our sweat rates, like they're
They
all
vary.
very
Yeah.
unique. I
Yeah.
mean, just from like in practice, people in larger bodies, I tend to see a slightly like they're not usually my like very low sweat rates.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it can be moderate, like
Sure.
middle of the road.
Same.
It
Yeah.
doesn't automatically mean that like you need to have a ton more fluid
Totally.
per hour.
I've had some small people who have ridiculous, like shockingly high sweat rates.
Yep.
But and then what I was referring to based on body weight, that was more your like everyday baseline hydration needs. So that is more body weight. But with performance fueling, no, sweat rates are not always linked to body size, but sometimes we see that.
And
I think that's mostly it. I think those are the big ones that I would call out for fueling. And then I'd say the only other thing that we could call attention to, and I don't want to go too into this because it could open a whole box. But number one, if you are in a larger body, you have a higher body mass, we are never assuming that you're trying to lose weight or that you need to lose weight or anything like that. We also know that there are many people in larger bodies, especially in this GLP-1 world we're living in, who want to lose weight and are trying to lose weight, right?
Yep.
So this, of course, complicates things because we are talking about how greater body mass increases fueling needs. This is a everyday fueling needs and a performance fueling needs, right? So this is, we can kind of briefly discuss or call attention to things, but I think it's more just sending the message that if you are training for an event, and I know you believe this and say this all the time as well, like not an appropriate time to try to shrink yourself. That is not going to end well for anybody. And I don't know if there's just anything else you want to kind of say in that, in that area.
Yeah. And I think, we can't say that enough. So we're just going to keep yelling it. But, I struggle when I hear these types of things and hopefully keep yelling that our minds are so powerful, right? And that, well, I'm not opposed to people like wanting, like having weight loss as one of their goals. If we are in season, if we're going for performance, if we're really training for a big race, like just starting to work on flipping that mindset and that headspace to how can I show up to give my body what it needs to like be its best, like in workouts and out of workouts, rather from, it's like the abundance mindset versus the scarcity mindset. It's the same where like me in my head, I'm like, okay, my training is going up. Oh, I can get whole milk. That's a small little needle I can move to just like increase my intake pretty simply right here, where I'm thinking rather than like, oh my God, whole milk has extra fat, I'm afraid of it. I'm like, okay, wait, this is an easy way for me to get a little bit more to support all of the demands I'm doing. So I think,
or like adding juice, the same thing. Like, oh, it's empty calories, so much sugar. No, it's a great, easy way to add nutrients and carbs and all that good stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Same thing.
Just like that mindset is like, yes, obviously we want to balance our performance plates. Like I have a reel actually scheduled about like eating Oreos and like bashing the don't eat something with more than 5 or 6 ingredient rule. Like that would leave me broken and underfueled while I'm training for a marathon, right? It's just like kind of flipping that mindset and flipping that script. And that's just, then you're taking actions from a more positive place rather than a place of shame, right? We know disordered eating and eating disorders and restriction is all like kind of based in, there's a lot of shame involved in it. There's nothing wrong with struggling with those things, but if you aren't working on these things or struggle with this, just kind of floating the concept out there for you to kind of, sit with, I think it just can be so, so powerful when you're in that training block or you're really looking to, hit whatever your personal best might be.
Yeah. And the main reason I brought it up is because, if you are at a larger body size, and again, that's a relative term. That is such a subjective term. You can be at a whole range of weights and think that you're large, small, whatever. So let's just throw that out there. But if you are in what you would consider a larger body and one of your goals is to be smaller, just reminding you that especially if you are an active person, you deserve and need to fuel. Like that really is the message we want to send out, that because the mindset might be, oh, why do I need to take all those gels? Or why would I want all that sugar? Like, oh, simple sugar, but I'm trying to lose weight or whatever it may be. There are a million reasons why you need to fuel yourself, and particularly in that intra-workout, so the before, the during, the right after, for health, for performance, for a million reasons. So please, whatever your weight is, however you think about it, you deserve and need fuel. Yep. That is the message. Stevie, cosign. Stevie, thank you so much for coming back on today. Where can everyone find you if they want to give you a follow and work with you or whatever else?
Yeah, you can find me on my corner of the internet, on Instagram at Stevie Lyn. My website is stevielynrd.com. And you can also check out my podcast, which Claire is and will be on again, Real Fuel with SLS.
Yay. Awesome. Thanks, Stevie. See you again soon.
Thanks.
Bye. That's our show for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Before you go, I have a huge favor to ask. If you're enjoying this podcast, would you be willing to share it with a friend or on social media? I would also appreciate it if you're able to leave me a 5-star rating and review. And be sure to hit follow or subscribe wherever you listen so you don't miss an episode. Also, I have some affiliate codes that you can use to help support my free content if you'd like. You can use, for instance, Eat for Endurance 20 over at Scratch Labs if you're a first-time customer, and you can visit the shop page on eatforendurance.com for all of my other affiliate codes. Lastly, I do have a Patreon page that I've linked to in the show notes for as little as $1, or you can really give as much as you want, but there are lots of free perks involved, so I encourage you to go visit that page. As always, please get in touch with any feedback, topic requests, or just to say hi. I would absolutely love to hear from you. All right, see you guys next time.